Welcome everybody to the March California Horticultural Society meeting. We'll have Jim Bishop and his wildflower adventure in about a half hour. But first we're going to do the plant forum. So I want to thank everybody who participated this month. It was we got a few new ones, which I appreciate. So Mary Ingalls and Robbie Ridenour, Judy Wong, Richard Starkison, Mark Delapine, and myself. And we'd like to encourage everybody to share anything going on in your garden. You know, anything goes. Highlights, disasters, everybody learns from those. And you can send here's my email address by 5 o'clock the Sunday before the meeting. And this April will be April 18th. And then send them over. So I don't think Mary's with us. She was going to visit her family down in Phoenix. So maybe Judy can talk about this Lacanalia, since she seems to be the Lacanelli expert.
This is one of the early bloomers. It's got this wonderful turquoise color, which makes it very popular. It's pretty easy to grow. I believe, if I'm trying to remember, that it's almost extinct in the wild, but it is easily grown in gardens or in pots. So worth growing and blooms for a week, 10 days, maybe more.
And I looked it up, and it's pollinated by the lesser double-collared sunbird, which is a really colorful bird. And I guess it's similar to kind of a hummingbird. And it probes the long beak into the tubular flowers, and then, it's from the ground rather than, because the stems of the flowers are too weak to actually hold them up. So
yeah, and sunbirds are much bigger than hummingbirds. They don't hover, they land.
Okay.
I find this one is a little more fussy than many of the Lacanalias, that it really does need to be totally dry in the summer. If you water it, it rots.
Oh,
That's good to know.
that's interesting.
Whereas many other Lacanalias are much more flexible.
Well, none of my Lacanalias get summer water, so maybe that's why they're happy.
And this is at Mary's house as well. She gardens in Berkeley, but she has her Monstera is blooming. And
Wow.
it sounded like you could eat the space there once it fully ripens. I mean, don't take my word for it if you're going to eat your Monstera. Look it up, but that's kind of what I just for the meeting here. But evidently, if it's not ripe enough, it irritates the inside of your mouth or something. So watch out. But here it is on right by the steps there. And then Robbie in the house.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, you want to talk about your friend's Xantheria?
Well, yeah, I wish I could say I was growing this, but my friend who lives in Pleasanton picked this up from neighbors or a garden club member's garden that they were changing their style and they didn't want it anymore. And I think Sandra said that was about 10 to 15 years ago. And it did shoot up a small bloom a couple of years back, but then she hadn't seen anything for a couple of years. And then this year it shot up another one, and she sent me pictures and I went, ooh, wow. It's pretty large now. I think she said it's about 3 to 4 foot. Her husband helped her dig it out of the garden club members' other garden and bring it in to plant it, because it was pretty good size back then, I guess. They have it, they transplanted it by a concrete patio with southeast sun exposure and just the faintest netophyll near, but no additional summer water. And it kept expanding over the years until the size it is now. So I just thought it was pretty impressive and wanted to share it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you. And then Judy, you are on.
Okay. Oh, there, I'm unmuted. Right, this is Ribes sanguineum white icicle. This is deciduous. It's an early bloomer. It's just in full bloom now, and it needs part sun to shade, occasional water, and it's supposed to be a fast grower to about 5 or 6 feet. It is native to the north coast ranges of California up to British Columbia. And it was introduced by the University of British Columbia in 1988 after it was collected on Vancouver Island. Now mine grows on the north side beside the trunk of a redwood tree, and I rarely water it, but I think the redwood duff kind of keeps it moist, and it's gorgeous in flower.
I have one too, and I really enjoy it. It's kind of lacy, delicate.
Yeah.
Really
The only thing that would make it better is if it had a fragrance, which it does not.
can't have it all.
All right.
Whoop.
Oh, there you go. Some folks may have seen this, the Ferraria crispa. I've been very lucky to get this to bloom reliably for me in the last few years. And it's one of the 18 species of Ferraria, which grow, they're widespread on the coastal west coast, particularly of South Africa, and they like the winter rainfall, summer dormant weather that we have in our Mediterranean climates. The flowers are somewhat short-lived, but somebody described them as mutant starfish, and they have a strong odor. I think mine's is a little bit maple sugarish, but some people don't like the smell. I guess some of them have a smell that's not as pleasant. But the flowers can vary quite a bit, from dark brown to maroon to almost black, cream, and yellow, but they all have these kind of frilly edges and blotches and speckles all over. Now the bulbs multiply very rapidly and can remain attached to each other. So if you do plant it and you find a bunch of bulbs, be cautious because the top and the bottom of the bulb look very similar. So when in doubt, they suggest planting it sideways. And I grow mine in pots. And like I said, it's bloomed quite well the last few years.
So just for further information, for years, including this year, they sell this as a bulb that you plant now, which I find so ironic. And one of the reasons probably people do not plant it.
Or aren't successful at it because.
Yes, for sure.
Huh.
I wonder if that's because I distribute it back east as well.
Well, would it grow back east?
Well, maybe it's a house plant or a green.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how big is your pot?
I grow it in a 1 gallon pot.
Hmm.
Yeah, but there are a lot of, it does really.
Yeah,
work
I grow them too. But
in a gallon pots, Bart?
yeah, I grow them in both gallon pots and in clay pots that sort of the azalea pot style.
Mhm.
But that I agree, they produce bulbs like crazy. And that I was wondering, Judy, do you disconnect those bulbs? Because they look almost like orchid pseudo bulbs that of course are just storage organs and typically won't do something. And I haven't separated mine and potted them up separately to know if that makes a difference. And also, what are you doing that's different that gets them to flower every year? I do have some pots that flower every year, but it's few of the bulbs flower each year.
So, I found that also because I got a bunch of them because we unpotted some stuff up at the Botanic Garden in San Francisco. And have several gallons that have lots of bulbs in them. And we had them for years up there and they never bloomed, probably because the weather wasn't quite right for them. But even now down here, they haven't bloomed. I get lots of leaves. And I was wondering, if there's kind of like not sterile, but that certain ones that don't bloom. I've not heard that, but it does seem like a long time and they don't seem to do much.
So my thought would be though, like so many bulbs, they are too crowded and they have no need to bloom because they always tell you divide your bulbs.
Mm-hmm.
it would be interesting experiment to see if you divided them this year into 4 groups and if they gave you a better show. That would be my
That's a
observation.
good thought. That's a good thought.
It is a good idea. And that I know that one of my pots that I haven't dealt with in a while, that there's so many bulbs in it that they're kind of exploding out the top.
Mm-hmm.
Little busy these days, huh, Bart? Can't divide your bulbs, huh?
Definitely so.
An
Okay.
exotic orchid type of look to them.
They
Yeah,
do.
and many of them do smell like carrion. There
Oh,
are
great.
some that do have sweet scents, but most of them do not. And it's because they're also fly pollinated. And if Ted Kipping was still around, he would say, yeah, that's all those markings are like to mimic fly droppings, so that they know that it's a good place to gather.
So I do have a question. Has anybody tried them in the ground? Because I'm trying now.
I have not.
I have
I-
a friend in Berkeley who has had them in the ground for several years, and they flower regularly in a situation that gets only a tiny amount of water during the summer. Very well drained, actually kind of gritty soil in full sun. I was there a week ago yesterday, and they were just beginning to open.
Wow.
I have some that Judy gave to me a year ago, I believe, and they're in the ground. They've come up, but they have not bloomed yet.
I think
I'm
that's
in Campbell, by the way.
Do you see flower buds coming?
I
Because
do
they
not
should
see any
be.
flower buds. I see green leaves, and that's it.
Oh.
Well, it's that you can always tell the inflorescences because the leaves are denser and then they start making a stem. Whereas typically, if they're not going to bloom, there's just random leaves all over the place.
There
Now
are
you can
random
see
leaves
those
all over the place, but we didn't get a lot of water this winter, so a lot of things are kind of spindly.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
mine,
did
mine
watering.
have not bloomed yet, but they are spiking.
Oh, they are, yeah. You can see how they branch. The bloom spikes kind of branch off, and then the flowers are, like I said, are very short lived, like a day to 2 days maybe. But they're successive, so you get lots of flowers over the length of time.
Yeah, I don't have anything that looks like a flower.
I have this feeling they need to mature before they'll bloom for some reason. I don't know why. Does that sound
could be.
right?
Probably.
All right, we'll keep
Okay,
trying.
moving on.
All right.
Yeah, I think we all need to experiment with our huge number of bulbs.
Report back, people.
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay, and these are the last two. So the one on the left is a freesia laxa, and the subspecies is Azaria. So the flower is kind of a bluish purple, and you may be familiar with the more common variety, which is freesia laxa, subspecies laxa. And these were formerly in Anomatheca and Laperoussia. So they may sound like they have a new name, but they don't. Oh, but they do. They also like coastal habitats, coarse sand soils in South Africa. Like I said, the common species that you see, and if you've been to the Botanic Garden in San Francisco, they really self-seed quite rampantly, and they're easy to pull out, but they really spread. The blue one is a little bit more difficult to grow, and it also has seeds which are red. And the interesting thing is the corms on the Azaria, they're attached together, kind of like spike proteins on the COVID virus. I hate to use that, but they're kind of spiky around the main corm, whereas the one on the right has a lot of individual corms, and that may be one of the reasons it grows more easily, because there are more corms and they kind of spread themselves around.
Okay, the one on the right is the laxa, right? The
Yes.
subspecies laxa. Yeah, I have a name on there. I don't know what I did with it. Probably under the picture.
Yeah, real common. I mean, or it really just self-seed. And yeah, this is a Babiana villosa. And I think I got this from Annie's, I think, at one time. But like I said, Ellen here says, I knew that it was a favorite food of baboons. And so I remember Don Mahoney told me that they grow them, he saw in some botanic garden in Africa in a deep trough that was 3 feet deep.
Wow.
And I know, I went like 3 feet. But anyway, because the baboons like to eat them. So in order to protect themselves, they've developed this kind of self protection. Let me see what else. This is a winter grower, summer deciduous, drought tolerant. Like I said, the contractile roots are what pull the corms down.
Mm.
And the flowers evidently are long lasting, but they come in mauve, pink, and the dark red. And I have the dark red, which I like.
Yeah, it's a beautiful shade. Okay, Richard Starkison, did I see you come in?
Okay, so this Rhodana pedicitis, I got, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago from either Stribing or the UC Botanical Garden. And it's the one on the right here. And it blooms continuously for months. And it hasn't gotten very large. It could grow. I think in Stribing they have one that gets 8 feet tall or something. But it's easy to cut back, and it just blooms continuously. Needs very little water whatsoever in Berkeley or San Francisco. And the one on the left is not the same plant. It's I think well, Ted Kipping would probably say Senecio, but it's probably also a Senecio or a Senecio that is somewhat related. I don't know what it is. I've had it for years. Again, I got it at some arboretum sale. And
Both of these are in your garden?
Yeah, and this, the one on the left of the screen, it grows to about, if you let it, 6 feet or so, and it continually flowers throughout the spring and winter.
So Richard, I have to tell you, I don't know if you saw that I shared this plant.
Yes, I did, and I was wondering, I
Okay,
said something.
so
and I was
it's not
wondering-
Rhodana pedicitis. When I shared it to the med group,
Yeah. Well, which one did you
Randy
share?
said it was Archon something or other. It's there. He has it listed. It's because they get taller and they're ganglier. The pedicitis is the one that gets very normally has reddish stems and reddish stems on the leaf petioles going up, and then the flowers also have red. This is the Archon blah blah blah.
Well, these are two different plants, Kristen. As you,
Right, but they look, neither of them look like pedicitis unless maybe the one on the right is the
Oh, I see.
pedicitis without.
well, I was
the
told
red.
that's what it was when I got it. So,
Yeah,
and
well,
I think San Marcos had the one on the right.
then that would be Archen blah blah blah.
Okay,
Can you send me that name, Kristen, and I'll put it in there as well.
yeah, that would be nice to know.
Okay,
Yeah,
do I have
'cause
to do it
the-
right now?
No, you can get it later.
I don't know how to do that.
The pedicites is a very different looking plant, typically denser, and actually it's common around the Bay Area. There's one in the yard next door to me here in Point Richmond. They tend to be hairier leaved. It looks like yours doesn't have much hairs at all.
Well, it does have hairy
Um,
leaves. They just don't show up.
And
in the
again,
photograph.
they're excellent plants. What?
They're what?
They are very good plants for coastal gardens. They don't really take much water at all, like you said.
Right. And this one does have hairy leaves. You just can't see them in this photograph.
Nice to have the yellow
Okay.
flowers in the wintertime too, because it's, bright and cheery.
Yeah, and by the way, they did always come back, even at 18, they would freeze to the ground, and then it would be like copsing. They'd make really big new leaves when they came up, but I never saw the flowers. But now in the last 2 years, I've had a lot of flowers, and I think it's because, we're not hitting the cold we used to hit.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that it is something you can coppice all the way to the ground. And again, that's what's frequently done with it, because it can get kind of rangy if you don't cut it back. And cutting it back just 30 inches might not be enough.
Yeah, well, the freeze cut everything back,
Yeah.
without my decision making here.
Yeah, well,
Oh.
and you ended up with a nice result.
Well, I actually like the flowers better.
The one on the right has never been subject to a freeze, and but it does get cut back to about, as I said, 30 inches tall periodically. So I didn't want it to get monstrous. So, but it continues to grow and flower.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, well, I put this in, this is from last week, just kind of, it's a similar plant,
Aha.
kind of as far as the yellow and big leaves in the wintertime. So, and then there's that, evidently that other one that looks very similar to the Rolandia or
Rolldana.
what is it?
Rolldana.
Rolldana. Okay, so then this is my little contribution. I have I think it's the Eternal Fragrance Daphne Transatiaca.
Transatianica.
Thank you. Okay, and it's. I mean, I have it in a pot with some other things, and it was just kind of a filler plant, and it's kind of a nice dark green foliage and kind of compact. The fragrant blooms, it's in full bloom right now. Easy to grow. It gets probably midday to mid-afternoon sun, and then it gets in the shade. Fragrant flowers, not as nice as the odorata, of course, but nice little plant. Kind of has a boxwoody look to it.
Also blooms on and off all year.
Does it? I
Yeah,
haven't
for
noticed
me
it.
it does.
It's in full bloom now. It caught my eye, but
Yeah, no, it blooms in the summer. That's why it's eternal fragrance.
oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't think about that. Well, that's good. I'll keep an eye on it a little bit more. And then the fuchsia autumnale. I really like this plant because it's very showy. It'll cascade over a pot. This is the new growth coming out. And I a lot of times will keep it trimmed back so it'll get the new growth on it. But it does have the regular classic single, dancing flowers if you let it grow. But it tends to get really long and lanky before it will flower, but they're very showy flowers as well. But they're competing with the leaves at that point too. So, but easy to grow. I haven't had any problem with like fuchsia mite. I'm not sure if that's still a problem. I don't grow many fuchsias, but the two that I grow don't have any problems with it. So, and then last but not least, I think is Mark.
This is well, you can see it. It's the five-finger fern, or the Adiantum ludicum, and I've killed it a bunch of times. I love the thing, but it looks great up in the regional parks garden. And the best I've seen it in the wild was up in Oregon, I think in a state park. Is it Silver Falls? Maybe there's a Seven Falls trail, and almost behind every single waterfall, this is growing.
Okay, cool. And then I found out that adiantum comes from the Greek meaning unwetted, referring to the frond's ability to shed water without becoming wet.
Yeah, and if you want to see huge amounts of it, go to the North Coast to Fern Canyon. It's in one of our parks up there, and it's a very deep canyon with vertical sides, and both sides are just wall-to-wall Adiantum ludicum.
Nice.
Spectacular.
Yeah. Or just go to your workplace and you get a good look too.
Yes, and they're fairly easy to grow from spores. I'm surprised you're not able to keep it at your house, because I have them here at my house in Richmond.
Do they go
Very
totally
nice,
dormant
really. I don't
like the
want
other one?
No, Adiantum ludicum is evergreen, and Jordanii is deciduous.
So you have to keep
Jordanii
it wet?
has to go dormant. And yeah, Aludicum, you generally want to water, but don't overwater it. And it needs water kind of year round. Jordanii, no, it can go dry for the summer when it's dormant. And then Capillus veneris, our southern one, that one wants water all the time too.
Okay.
We also have a new species called Shastensi that was recently described from up in Shasta County.
Cool.
Cool. Okay, I'm not gonna spend much time on this, but please send me stuff. April should be a good month for stuff starting to show up in your garden. Like I said, I had a little hard time finding something to show off, so I want to encourage everybody to send stuff in. I love those discussions. Makes it more interesting. We can share our experiences. So next month, Dan Hinckley will be joining us. We're co-sponsoring this program with the Livermore Amador Valley Garden Club. And so they'll be joining us at our normal meeting time. So that was nice of them to indulge us on that. And if you don't know Dan Hinckley, he's a plant explorer, and he used to have Heronswood Garden, and now he has this new garden, which I guess he's been visualizing since 2000. So it's been in the works for quite a while, but he has all these plants that he has accumulated in a very artistic, natural way. And he'll be kind of sharing his trials and tribulations and wins and all this stuff with his new garden. And he's a very entertaining garden speaker as well. So, and he used to have a, plant introductions through Monrovia. So he worked with Monrovia for quite a while. I'm not sure if he's still doing that or not, but, and then he has his newest book with Wincliffe, A Story of People, Plants, and Gardens. So look forward to that next month.
Hey, Ellen, this is Josh. Is it true that Dan Hinckley has never killed a plant?
Not true at all.
Yeah, I have not heard that. You'll have to ask him next month.
I can assure you, he will tell you that he's killed thousands of plants.
All great gardeners have.
He insists it's a measure of a good gardener.
There you go. There you go. Without further ado, Jim Bishop is our speaker for this evening, and he is joining us now. He's been having a little bit of internet problems, so I might be showing the slides. I'm not sure. Jim, are you there?
I am.
Okay, let me introduce you first.
Well, you know what's going on? So I mean, I know you're going to introduce me, but so I'm connected to my iPhone. We had it kind of working because I don't know why, you know, Saturday it went down. Our internet's been great until the minute you said, let's start the meeting today, and boom, everything went down. We've been fiddling with it all this time. I'm connected to my iPhone through the cellular. While we got that working, the network came back up and it took over my iPhone and threw me off again. So I'm back on the cell phone. If I get kicked off, our Wi-Fi is now working, but I'm not on our Wi-Fi. So if the video's poor or something, we'll switch back over to that, because I now have two ways to get on here. God knows if any of them will keep working.
Okay, well, if all else fails, I can do the presentation here and you can talk on your phone if nothing.
It actually looks, do I look pretty good? I mean, on mine, I'm pretty clear. So
oh yeah, you look good. You look fine.
Jim,
Okay.
you look about 30 years old.
Thank you. That's the right answer. Where do I pay? I probably will shut off my video so that I don't, you know, to get my bandwidth down, just in case. I don't think I have a bandwidth.
Okay, okay. Well, I want to introduce Jim. He is I think since 2009, the president of the San Diego Horticultural Society. And he's been the horticulturalist of the year down there. He has an amazing garden, and I've only seen pictures. I know Marcus visited, I'm sure some others have visited, and we might have to see if we can get a tour at some point. He has rock mosaics and wine bottle barriers and all sorts of wonderful succulents and such, which look fantastic. But anyway, tonight he is going to give us a tour of the Superblom of 2019 and of San Diego, from sea to mountains to desert. And I think he said from January to July. So that should be really a treat. And I got a little taste of it on Saturday when we went through the presentation a little bit. And I'm really anxious to see what he has. And he said he's not a professional botanist, and he has identified the plants as well as he can. So if anybody has any, knows what something is and it's something other than what he has, then, please speak up. I'm sure he'd like to know.
Okay, so hi. As Ellen was saying, I'm a plant generalist, and I know a little bit about, I know something about everything, but not in detail about everything. I'm not a native plant expert by any means, but I've lived in San Diego for almost 40 years. And so I kind of learned what's going on with some of our native plants, and I hike a lot. And then in 2019, we had this Superblom. Oh, and I just wanted to say, this will be at the end too. I have a blog, so I'm going to do some desert photos, but I have a blog on there with the desert bloom from 2019, which has a lot more than I'm going to cover here. I'm not going to just do the desert though. So anyway, so if it'll be at the end, if you need it later, we can give you my blog. It's got a bunch of other stuff too. Like I travel a lot, so there's a lot of travel in there. Oh. Anyway, so we're talking about the Superblom. The Superblom is not just poppies. Everybody thinks it's just, especially down here, everybody thought it was all California poppies. And I'm going to show you that it's many other things as well. So what is a Superblom? Well, to have a Superblom, there's no real great definition for it. But anyway, to have one, it has to start raining early in the fall and then continue through the spring. And we need a relatively cool weather without any major heat waves. And in 2019, we didn't have any winter Santa Anas. And this year we had a million of them. Those heat waves really put a dent in our annuals. If we get a long period, and we definitely had that this year. Plus we didn't have any fall rain. And so really the major thing it means is just more flower blooms than usual. And the Superblom in 2019 was particularly unusual in that it covered all of Southern California up into Central California. I went up to Carrizo that year. It was pretty good. It wasn't as good as it was in 2017. So I hear you guys in the Bay Area, it wasn't nearly as good as what we had down here. But they can also be localized. In 2018, we had a big drought, and Lake Cuyamaca up in our local mountains, Lake Laguna up in our local mountains had some unusual rainstorms, and they had a Superblom in the middle of the drought, which was very surprising in May. The whole area around the lake was just solid with flowers, so they can be very localized. It isn't the total amount of rain. In fact, 2019 wasn't particularly wet here. It's the frequency. So without things drying out, a lot more annuals can survive and come into bloom. And then the other thing, of course, that really helps us here in San Diego is we live in a biodiversity hotspot. San Diego County has more species of native plants anywhere outside of Hawaii, county-wise. Hawaii is the only one that beats us. And part of the reason is, this is a sunset map. We have all these climate zones, and we cheat a little because we're a very, very large county. I think we're third or fourth largest in California. So we cover everything from the coast here to the inland valleys, to the mountains, to the high desert and the low desert. So we pick up all of those different climate zones in between. And then there's these pockets in between as well. So we have a huge number of climate zones. We also kind of meet with the stuff from Central and Northern California, some things from the Sierras and things from Baja, all kind of get mixed up here in San Diego. So we have some stuff that doesn't show up in other places because of that, or it does show up in other places and just happens to also show up in San Diego. So anyway, let's get going here. So the very first thing in February, I saw this on Facebook. A friend of mine here is really good with native plants, and he posted these pictures of this chocolate lily, and I had to contact him to go see it because he wouldn't tell me where it was. Well, it turns out it's in Mission Trails Park over on a weird side of it. You walk through a neighborhood to get there instead of through the main entrance. And I was able to find them, and I knew they were here, but I've never seen them bloom until that year. And I got there before anybody picked them, and that was really early, February 24th, for stuff like that. So the thing that followed that immediately was the desert went into bloom in February, which it usually is more like March and April. And the far eastern part of the desert had some freak October rains, or summer rains actually, some thunder showers and some rain, and it germinated the annuals. So the first part of the bloom in February was not up in Borrego, what we're used to. It was all the way out on the far side of the desert. So we went out there to check it out. There's a lot of sand out there. And there's three main flowers that everybody goes for. And this is the first one. It's an evening primrose. The moths show up pretty fast and eat this down to nothing, but it was so fast this year that you could get out there and there were fields and fields of this. And it's mixed with sand verbena. And this comes up really fast and it looks like it should be there all year. It's so big, but it doesn't. It totally disappears. And here is why they call it sand verbena. The sand dunes will swallow it. And then the third one, everybody goes out to, they think it's California poppy, but it's not. It's Parrish's poppy. It's a desert version, and it's more yellow. It's a little shorter. It doesn't do mass fields, but it mixes in with everything, and you get these large sprays of yellow flowers out there. So that's what people in San Diego think is the desert superbloom is, but there's a lot more to it than that. The other plant that shows up pretty regularly is the desert lily, but most years these are about 4 or 5 inches tall. In 2019, though, they were like 18 inches and 2 feet tall, which is really unusual. I'm not sure if there were more of them, but they were certainly more noticeable. These also get munched down pretty fast. The rabbits and everything love them, but it was so fast again this year, they were able to get up and bloom, and there were masses of those. Another one that's pretty common, now this shows up even on dry years, is the Arizona lupin from Arizona, obviously. This usually shows up along the roadsides. It's the picture doesn't really do it justice. It's a very unusual shade of purple, very kind of a pale purple. And then when you hike up into the canyons, you get a whole lot of desert bluebells or different types of, I'm gonna try to say this. I should mention I learned most of my gardening online, so I've not heard a lot of Latin names actually pronounced. So my pronunciations are my own. And so I hope you appreciate them for what they are. But anyway, this is Phacelia. And this particular one likes to grow right up against the white granite boulders, which are in a lot of our valleys when you go into up into towards the mountains in Borrego. And then this is a really rare one, at least for me, Phagonia. And the reason I put it in here was a friend of mine in Greece was posting their version, and it looked just like ours. And I was like, wow, because I didn't know this plant was that well. It's like versions of it spread. Anyway, I'd never seen this before. I've seen it a couple times. Anyway, it's a beautiful plant. It looks like nothing in the summer, but it was this nice, lush looking thing that was pretty incredible in the rains. But this is the one I was looking for, the Desert 5 spot. I've known about it for a few years. This is only about 5 inches tall. It's in the mallow family, obviously. The problem with it is that the flowers are not opened when it's cool, when it's windy, when it's in shade, when it's morning, or when it's afternoon. So you can hunt around forever for it. And I've gotten where I recognize the leaves. These purple leaves look a little bit like African violets to me for some reason. And I can find the leaves, but half the time the flowers aren't open. So you have to just time it right. So we hunted the first day for hours to find the single flower, and then we found a few more. And then of course the next day we were in another part of the desert and there were hundreds of them. So it's just hit and miss. Another one that was out there that I probably there all the time, but probably sand dunes and a nightmare, in my opinion. You should really shut that place down because you're trying not to get run over while looking at wildflowers by people going dunes, and you don't honor it. Am I back?
Yeah, we hear you now.
Do you still have a screen?
Yes.
Just
Yeah,
on my
maybe-
screen.
Yeah.
Let me know if it doesn't switch to the next one. So anyway, this is in addition to being here, out here to the right, the desert for about as far as you could see was these yellow desert sunflowers in March of 2019. Okay, so this mammillaria is pretty common in the desert, but one of the cool things about it is it's got this really weird distribution. It's very common in the desert, and then it skips all of the inland valleys and everything, and then it shows up again right at our coastline. So it's in Torrey Pines and a lot of valleys here on the coast, and then it's all the way out in the desert. So, and it's pretty much a San Diego plant, as you can see. All the locations here are pretty much, there's a few up in Riverside County here, but it's pretty common in San Diego, which I think is kind of cool. And there's a few other plants that do that. And this is the same plant. This was actually taken last year, growing straight on the side of one of those granite boulders out in the desert, which I thought was pretty cool. So we decided to go look at the poppies, but most of the poppies were up in Riverside County. And every time we check, everybody'd say, don't go, you'll never get anywhere to park. You're gonna be really sorry that you went. You're gonna have to walk for like 3 miles on the freeway. So we heard Rattlesnake Canyon, which I'd never heard of, which is Poway, which is a local town inland here in the foothills, had a great poppy bloom. So we went out there and we were surprised to find this old dam with water running over it. I never even knew it existed. The poppies, however, were not open because it was raining. So we got up into the chaparral and thought, well, we'll see what we can find up here anyways. We found the poppies, but when they're not open, they're not very interesting. So we got lost in the chaparral, couldn't find our way out, and I'm stumbling around, and somehow we ended up crawling, and I noticed that we're crawling on top of California peonies. So you guys have this peony too, I know. Anyway, it was kind of interesting because I was like, trying to figure out how we're going to get out of this canyon that we don't know, it has no trail at all, and we're lost in chaparral that's so dense we can't move. And we found poppies. I mean, I found peonies. Try to see if they can cross this with the ornamental ones, because you could make ornamental ones in our gardens here. And then coming back out with this California Sun Cup, which I've not seen before or since. There were fields of this. It kind of surprised me because I would have thought I would have remembered that flower from earlier years, but it was everywhere down in this low part there. Iron Mountain. Iron Mountain is actually pretty close to where that last place was we hiked. Iron Mountain is part of the city of Poway, and it all burned in 2003. And the first thing that came back was ceanothus. And so I think this is the peak. It might be that one. One of these is the peak of Iron Mountain. And this entire area here of dark is ceanothus. And it's mostly blue ceanothus, and there's white ceanothus. So it's kind of famous that you walk through these tunnels of ceanothus to get up there. Now, it wasn't opened at all in 2020 because of the pandemic. And then we went out there 2 weeks ago, and because of the drought, there were a few ceanothus in bloom, but very little. It was kind of sad. But also up on Iron Mountain is this plant, which is Southern Mountain Misery, which has, it's unique in that it's almost entirely in San Diego and entirely in our foothills. There is a related version of it that grows in the Sierra foothills, but we have our own species here in San Diego. And it's quite ornamental when in bloom. I don't know what it looks like in the summer, and it's very resinous, so it's very flammable, everybody tells me, but so is everything else here, so I don't put too much emphasis on that. And then the other one that was up there, I know about this one for a few years because I usually see it at the same time, is Styrax. And it's an unusual place for it because, as you can see on the map here, it's all around the foothills and the Sierras and the coast ranges up in Northern California. And then it jumps around and it shows up in our local mountains. Now, this is the only place I've ever seen it in our local mountains. But it's a beautiful flower. The leaves, the picture doesn't really catch it, but these look like the things that bloom. Oh well. Anyway, it looks like an ornamental plant. They're shinier than this, and then these beautiful white flowers that hang down, and then it has huge seed pods or huge seeds afterwards, which I took some of, but I couldn't get any of them to germinate. When I was up there last summer, they were in seed. We're going to skip back over to the coast. This is still in March. Most people go to Torrey Pines. The sad part about Torrey Pines is it's gotten overrun by people. It's gotten very, very popular for joggers, and it's just overwhelming, the number of people. Even during the week, it's overwhelming now. It didn't used to be that way. But if you go just to the south of Torrey Pines, near the university, you go through this, there's a wealthy neighborhood called La Jolla Farms. And the very first driveway in La Jolla Farms, their first side street, takes you over to the Scripps Institute of Oceanography. And they've restored the entire top of this hill there with natives. I don't know how they got rid of the non-native plants, but they've done a really good job. And this is La Jolla here in the background, and this is Scripps Pier. And it's got a lot of Artemisia in it. And then the main flower it has is Encilia californica, which is the sunflower that's native down here. I don't know if you guys have it or not. This is a favorite of Caltrans lately. It's on all our freeways here all of a sudden. They're planting it everywhere, but there's a lot of that. And then the other one that's unusual is, I know this is Coreopsis maritima, they renamed it though. As you look at the landscapes on the freeways and up in Malibu and over on the Channel Islands, you'll find Coreopsis maxima, but we have our own species here, which is Coreopsis maritima, and it has the same big, beautiful, these are about 6-inch across yellow flowers, but it doesn't have the trunk. And I've tried to grow this a few times. The snails love it. Unfortunately, I cannot keep them off of it, but it totally disappears in the summer. Whereas the other one leaves a trunk and it's still there all year. This, you wouldn't even know the plant was ever there once it dries up. And it only shows up on rainy years. So there's none of it at all this year out there. And then of course, the other problem is they've got Scripps Coastal Preserve still locked up from the pandemic. They haven't opened it and they shut it last March. I've tried to get in there a bunch of times. A very, very common wildflower in San Diego in the chaparral is mimulus. And this is the one that's everywhere. I have this actually growing wild in behind my house. I didn't know it was there. I lived here 15 years and never knew it even existed on my hillside, but I found it and couldn't believe I missed it. It's 6 feet by 6 feet. And it roots real easily, and it's all over the backside of Mount Soledad, and just about everywhere you go here, you see this. And this is in Mission Trails Park again along the road. And for some reason, there's a few hot pink ones, which is really unusual. And then also in Mission Trails Park, we have 2 species of native clematis. And this is one of them. This is the only one I've ever seen. I can't tell them apart. And you know, it has the Dr. Seuss fuzzy flowers later in the year, and you often see that, or the seed heads. You often see the seed heads, you rarely see the flower, but it does bloom in March, and it is a true clematis, and I'm growing it on my chain link fence, and actually I've had it there for 6 years, it's never done well. This year it's doing really well. I don't know what the difference is. And just to show, we do have California poppies, so everybody's going up to Northern California or Riverside to see it. And this is a city park here in San Diego. Mission Trails, and they had fields and fields of this, and I can't quite see it. It's behind the logo here with Ellen's name on it, but the whole hillside up here is covered with it, and all the hills here in Mission Trails were covered with poppies, which is kind of weird because I've been going there for 10 years and I never saw poppies until 2019 out there. So freak that they show up when we get these heavy rain events. One of the other reasons we didn't go look at the poppy fields is this is my garden, and I planted poppies way up. There's steps, that's only some of the steps, way up the top of the hill about 5 years ago, and they've slowly worked their way down, and this part of my hill is still native, but all this down here is not native. In fact, the right side's my cactus garden and the left side is mostly African. At any rate, it got overrun by poppies, totally overrun. It covered everything I planted. And these end up by the end of the season being over 3 feet tall. And now I weed them out. But at any rate, that's one of the reasons I didn't go. And this is also the same area of the garden. My whole bottom hillside, about half my property turned out to be solid poppies that year. So it's about half an acre of poppies. So it wasn't really worth going to see them anywhere else. They all look alike. Also, this is not a native plant, but it was in one of the other pictures in the background. This is a great verbena. I'm sure you guys grow it too. It's often in the trade. Anyway, it's from Citrus Island, though it's a selection, which is De La Mina. And anyway, it really draws the hummingbirds don't like it and the bees don't like it, but the moths love it. And you get a whole bunch of different species. Well, I guess the butterflies will come to it too. So you get a whole bunch of butterflies, and this is a big hawk moth.
Hey, Jim, did you say that is not native?
It's not native to, it's from a channel island off of Baja. there are some related species around, but I've not seen a native verbena here in San Diego. It's one of the Channel Islands, but it falls in the California floral area somehow, even though it's way down there. This is our native narrowleaf milkweed. I don't know if you guys have the same one, the same species. I'm not sure. This you see around here. It's not real common. It does go totally dormant in the winter. It's the one they want us to plant for the monarchs because the tropical ones here don't go dormant and it confuses the monarchs. Usually when mine gets to about the stage in the picture, this flower is not very big. It's probably only about 1.5 inches across. When it gets to this stage, the monarch caterpillars show up and mow it to the ground. And then I have to wait another year. And it's just now coming out of dormancy. And then I threw this in. This is also my garden. I've got 3 stands of Matahia poppies. And I see them often hiking in San Diego, but I'm very suspicious that they were planted because they're always right on the trail. Or they're also where a house or somebody used to live, 50 years ago or something. And so I'm suspicious that the ones I see when I hike are not native. They're more common in Orange County, but I've never actually seen them in Orange County either because I don't hike up there very often. One of my favorite places in San Diego for hiking is Cedar Creek Falls. This is the valley that's below here is where the San Diego headwaters for the San Diego River are. And this flows down and actually flows below our house here, which is kind of interesting. And this is part of the trail that's going to go out here for 3 miles. And you have to wade through the San Diego River 3 times to get to these waterfalls. But the reason this picture's in here is this plant here. I was looking at it. I was like, what is that? It looked like a ceanothus, but the color's wrong and I couldn't get close to it. And I finally got closer to it. It's our native cherry. It's Prunus licofolia. Anyway, it's the chaparral version of it. Most people here grow the one from Catalina, and I have this on my hill here in San Diego, but it looks very different because it's growing in dense chaparral. So mine are quite tall and very, very shiny leafy green. It's also pretty heavy up in Cuyamaca along the side of the road, and there it's so dense that it looks different again too, but they're all the same plant. It sets a cherry that's the same size as a regular cherry. However, it's almost all pit, and there's only a little fruit in there. And if you get ones in the sun, it's very bitter. So you have to pick them just the right time, but they're not worth it because there's so little fruit, but the seeds are really big. And I lived here for 15 years in my property, and I didn't know I had them. And I noticed them one day, and I had 15 of them, and they've come up everywhere, and they're not real long lived, maybe 10 years if you're lucky. And they get really big. They'll get to 30 feet and then die on you. And I see them used in some restorations here, but all of them I've seen in restorations because they water them in the summer, they all die. They get really big really fast and then die. So I think they do better in this harsh environment. This entire valley burned in 2003 and 2007. But this is why you go. This is Cedar Creek Falls. It's the largest waterfall in San Diego. This is a person here to give you an idea. And the next one is the video, and we're going to see. It probably isn't going to work because the internet is so bad. There's the person again. So I have no idea what you saw, but anyway, this is why you go out there. And just before you get there, the last river crossing, there's some ceanothus, which I think is tomentosus. I'm not sure. There weren't a lot of them there. It was a very late bloomer, and it looks very different than many of our other ceanothus. It doesn't look nearly as dry because it is down on the river. And then jumping up right to the edge of our county between us and Riverside, there's this famous rock everybody hikes up to called Eagle Rock, and it's near Warner Springs. And to get to it, you hike out the Pacific Crest Trail, but you hike it in reverse. And so we were there in the morning, and all these people that were backpacking the Pacific Crest Trail, they all get up really early to beat the heat. And they're trying to get to Warner Springs where we're parked. So we're continually crossing with people coming the other way. But the first half of the hike is the Pacific Crest Trail, and you go through an oak forest, and underneath those oaks are all these wildflowers. And this is Chinese houses, which there's quite a few different species, I believe, in California, and this is one of the local ones here. And I actually never saw this plant until a couple of years ago, and now I see it everywhere I hike. So I don't know whether I just wasn't noticing it or what the whole thing is. I bought a couple plants last year and saved seed, and I've got about 50 of them out there on the hillside that I'm hoping will not get eaten by the slugs, and I'll get some more bloom out of them this year. Pretty easy one to grow from seed. And then mixed in with them was this wonderful baby blue eyes, but the normal one is pale blue, and this one was royal blue, and I've not seen this royal blue one before. And it shows up a couple other places in San Diego too. Jumping a little further back towards the south and up into our local mountains, the close mountain range that's got the big state park in it is Cuyamaca, and then beyond that's the Laguna Mountains. So we've got two big mountain ranges in San Diego. Well, Lake Laguna or Lake Cuyamaca, these aren't there every year. They're usually up higher, but they were that year they were all around Lake Cuyamaca. These are cream cups. It's closely related to California poppy, but it likes it a little bit drier. And the flowers are about an inch to an inch and a half across. And I think I got some other pictures of them coming up. And then it's kind of marshy up there near the lake. It's obviously used to be much bigger in ancient times. And so it's very wet. And I was surprised to see this. This is meadow foam, which I know from the Sierras. And this is a picture of the meadow foam here in the wetland. And this is the lake out here. And you can see there's a lot of marshy area around the lake. And this is Cuyamaca Peak, I believe. And then you jump up to the Laguna Mountains. This is the same day. On the highway there, we have the Western Redbud, which I know everybody's probably familiar with. These are quite tall and quite old. There's not a lot of this in San Diego for some reason. I only know of 2 or 3 native stands. There's another one near here, and they're all together, and then it doesn't show up again. It's very odd distribution. And then behind it here are, this is white ceanothus. I don't know what species it is though, which blooms very late. So we're all the way out here to the end of April, which is my, I have this redbud in my garden. Mine's in bloom right now. So to give you an idea when it blooms, so it blooms a month and a half earlier than they do in the mountains. Back over to Cuyamaca State Park. This is Green Valley. Green Valley has some wonderful waterfalls that people aren't aware of, or a lot of people aren't. And this is the headwaters of the Sweetwater River. And the Sweetwater River, to me, looks bigger than the San Diego River. And I hiked the lower part of it last year. And then these are the waterfalls. There's a whole series of these cascading down the hills over the rocks. And then in 2019, the campground was closed because they were redoing it. And the ground squirrels took over. And we were surprised that we stumbled onto this bobcat hunting the ground squirrels. And then a few minutes later, this is the same bobcat. A few minutes later, though, when we were walking over the falls, we saw a bigger bobcat also hunting the ground squirrels. And they're not real rare here. I see about one a year, but it's kind of interesting. And they're a really beautiful cat. But then from Green Valley, you hike up a trail to the southern peak of Cuyamaca Mountain. This plant's pretty common all over California. It was up in Carrizo a lot too, I noticed. The Owl's Clover. And then, oh shoot, I had a distribution slide, it's not there. I thought this was everywhere. This is not, this is a Southern California plant. I had no idea that it's unique to us, or fairly unique. Golden Yarrow, this shows up just about everywhere in San Diego. It totally defoliates in the summer. I've tried to grow it in the garden. If you give it any water at all in the summer, you lose it, which it looks like mine isn't coming back this year. Very easy from seed. And these are about an inch across, but you get like hundreds of these flowers on the top. And it does look like yarrow because it's flat on the top, like a yarrow would be. And anyway, it's a beautiful plant. It really jumps out at you in the chaparral when it's in bloom. And it's usually along the sides of the roads. And then I'm told the Cuyamaca Mountains are kind of famous for their manzanitas. There's certainly a lot of them up there, but I have no idea how to tell one from the next. I mean, I can tell they're different species, but I don't know what they are. But anyway, I thought this one was really interesting. This obviously is adapted to dry and full sun. It has kind of fuzzy gray-green leaves, and it has the usual red bark, and it had some really nice fuzzy pink flowers. This is a plant that's all over California as well, Solanum parashai, except for parashai, it's probably, usually when you see that name, you can bet it's related somehow, usually to Southern California. Anyway, it's a nightshade related to tomatoes. But if you look underneath here, you get these beautiful green spots and then the darker purple back to it. And it looks to me a lot like a eggplant flower, which of course it's related to. And then I believe you guys have your own sweet peas that are native, and we have several here that are native just pretty much to Southern California. The problem with them is I can't tell them apart. I know some hikers who can tell them apart. They all look alike to me. They climb up in the chaparral. They bloom kind of late. We're all the way out here to the end of May. And they look a lot, they smell like sweet peas. The flowers aren't as big, but the vines are huge. They're usually, 6 feet or more. And then I know this goes up into the Bay Area. This is our bush honeysuckle, and this has a wide distribution. This is over in Cuyamaca, but it also grows on the coast here. So that's a pretty big distribution for this plant. It's mixed in with chaparral. You see it quite often. It's not very fragrant compared to regular honeysuckle, but if you put your nose right in it, it does smell like honeysuckle. Western wildflower, huge distribution on this plant. It grows all the way from our mountains here up into the Rockies, and sometimes they're orange. And I haven't really seen them until 2017, and they were everywhere in our local mountains in 2019. They were everywhere in our local mountains in 2019. And then I had no idea till today when I was looking at where this plant was native to. This mimulus, which I see in wet areas here in San Diego, is pretty much restricted to our mountains in San Diego. I had no idea that I could tell it needed wetter conditions than we usually have. So it's Cleveland's Clevelandii, which of course is the name of our local national forest. So it's probably endemic to our local national forest. And then this one too, I thought went all the way up into California, Northern California, and I was very surprised to find out that it's pretty much a Southern California plant. This is a big fire follower, blue woolly curls. I'm sure it shows up in some of your native plant sales because it shows up in all of ours. It's very hard for us to keep alive in gardens. I've got one left. I've killed 5 or 6. And this is a big enlargement on the flower. It's very hard to photograph because it's very fine and fuzzy, the plant. It doesn't photograph well, but the individual flowers are really quite something when you get up close to them. And the foliage, when you rub it, smells like juicy fruit gum, or kind of got a fruity fragrance to it. And it's definitely a fire follower. Anywhere that's burned, this is one of the 2 or 3 species that show up right away. And then again, I know you've got your own checker blooms, because I remember them when I lived in the Bay Area. I thought we had the same species, and then I found out we've got different ones down here. I had no idea. They look exactly like the ones up there to me, but this is our native one, and it's heavily concentrated in San Diego, as you can see there. This is grape soda lupin. I'm terrible at identifying lupins, but this one I can get because it smells like grape soda. And it's a very big bush, and they bloom in June and May along the highway in Mount Laguna, and they're quite a showstopper. And here again is the white ceanothus behind it in bloom. And then just to the south of Mount Laguna is a peak called Garnet Peak. And I'd always wanted to go up there because it drops off on the backside 4,000 feet straight into Borrego. In fact, you're almost in Borrego when you're in this peak. And this is kind of the scenery up there. So it's almost like a wildflower, sort of something you might want to plant. And some of these plants are, this is the woolly blue curls here again, the purple. This is, of course, our buckwheat, which is pretty common here in San Diego, common everywhere in the chaparral. And then this is Gallium, which is bed straw. And you might know the weedy version of it. This is actually a native version. We've got a couple native versions of it. And this is the bloom. It's a pale green. And after this, it gets these white fuzzy seed heads that look great too. And it looks good probably till like July or August, and then it looks terrible. And it's sticky like other bed straws. It will stick to you, especially when it's in seed, but it's easier to get off of you, and it's often kind of wrangly. And oddly enough, I'm not sure it's the same species, but it grows naturally on my hillside here in central San Diego. And I mentioned it a minute ago, California buckwheat. This is the most common one, just plain old California buckwheat. And I'm sure you know that it blooms with these wonderful white sprays very late June, and which is late for us in the wildflower season. It will then turn off to a orangey color and then eventually to rust, and it'll be persistent into the fall. We have a ton of erigerons, and I have no idea which one this is. They all look alike. They're all blue flowers, but anyway, they're kind of sprinkled around. California thistle. Interesting. I took that question mark off, and it's still there. I got another shot of that coming up that's better. Wonder what happened to that. Anyway, this is chamise. Chamise is another fire follower. This is still up on Garnet Peak, and you can kind of see here, this is Borrego out here, and this is Santa Rosa Peak up above Palm Springs. So the desert here is really steep, and it's straight down. You can't even, I mean, it's a trail that goes down that side of the mountains, or this particular valley. At any rate, it's not a great plant every year, but in the rainy seasons, it does this wonderful white thing, and I've got some more pictures of it coming up, I believe. Also up there was the bush poppy. This is looks a little different than the one, I think you guys probably grow this in your gardens. It's about 8 feet by 8 feet. It doesn't like summer water, but the one most people grow here is from the Channel Islands. They don't usually grow the ones from the local mountains, which like it a little drier and colder in the winter. This is the same plant, but this is on Banner Grade. Banner Grade is a windy road that runs between Banner and Julian, coming up from Borrego and the local mountains here. And there's quite a few of these alongside the road in there, and then they're mixed in with ceanothus and some of our native oaks. Back to chamise. This is Laguna Mountains. This entire valley, this goes forever, goes all the way down to the desert. It all burned in 2003. Everything burned, and the chamise came back, and that's it here. And this is also with some buckwheat, and then this is this pale yellow here all over the hill. This is all chamise, and it was just unbelievable in 2019. This is just a pullout on the side of the road, and then down in the valley here are live oaks, which also survived the fire and come back. Maybe a couple other species oaks in there too. But anyway, we're standing there and we heard like chainsaws, and we're like, why are there's nobody out here? And it was coming from over this direction. And the sound comes up the canyon here, and it got louder and louder and was approaching us, and then comes up and goes past us. And we're like, what is that? Well, it turns out it's cicadas, which I didn't know we had a native cicadas. I've never heard them before. And it was just deafening. And so you'd get these waves. One would start and it would trigger a lot of the other males, and they would all do it. And we never saw them, but the sound was so unbelievable. And that's a close up again of the chamise. Never looks, except for on a rainy year, it just kind of sparse bloom, but the rain really brought it out. And then mixed in with it, right? This is all the exact, I mean, I turned around the other way. This is across the little road. And this is in the median between the highway and the parking lot. Is Calichortus weedii. And it's not called weed because of it being weedy. It's weed as a person. He was involved with gold mining here in San Diego, and his friend named the plant after him. And I'll have some more distribution on where that grows. It's quite something though. This is my favorite wildflower in San Diego, and it's pretty widespread, and it has a lot of different looks. So the last pictures were driving up to this place. This is Laguna Meadows, or Laguna Lake. It's not the main lake, it's the second lake there. There's 2 or 3 big lakes up there. They're all very shallow because they're filling in. And the minute we started hiking, the wildflowers are incredible in 2019 up there. I've been up there a million times, and there's usually not very many at all. And it was unbelievable. So the first thing we ran into was another Calichortus, or Mariposa lily. And I think this is the right name of this one. I'm not sure. And it also takes on different appearances, because right near it, there were some that were pink instead of lavender. And it has all these different looks to it. And it's oddly enough growing right around the other one, the weedy one, mixed in together, which kind of surprised me that the two species would overlap that heavily. We mentioned this a little earlier, the California thistle, great plant. It looks like fiber, it really grabs the sun and refracts. And it's a big draw for the swallowtails. When you hike in Cuyamaca, whenever you see the swallowtails, if you follow them, they're always going to this plant. And there'll usually be 3 or 4 of them around it. Also in the Laguna Mountains is a viola, Pinetorum, which kind of tells you it grows under the pines. It's got very thick leathery leaves, and these were about 1 inch across, a little more. I saw them last year when it was drier, and they were like only 1/2 inch across. So the rain really made the flowers be a lot bigger than normal. Golden fields, there's a whole bunch of different species of golden fields in California, and I had no idea that we had our own, but we do, or Southern California does. There's several here that look similar but are different species, and I think this is the right one, the right name, and it grows under the pines also, and there's just fields and fields of this up there in the Laguna Mountains. And then we have a whole bunch of different Clarkias, and this one's pretty small flowered, but I thought it was really cool. I love the name Rhomboideae, and because if you look, the shape of the flower is a rhomboid if you remember your geometry. And then this is one I took last year further south, getting over close to Mexico in our local mountains, and I just thought it was incredible with these. What color do you call that? Pollen sacs, and the older ones here and the newer ones here. I just thought it was a fabulous little wildflower. And then we have a third Mariposa lily that shows up. This doesn't have all the dots and everything, and it's concolor, also up at Lake Laguna. So there's 3 different species there growing together. And I thought it was kind of interesting, real near it is this prickly pear. And this prickly pear has a big distribution. It can take cold and snow in the mountains, but I thought it's kind of funny that it has a, it's almost the exact same color as the Mariposa that was growing right with it. I don't know why that is, but I thought it was sort of interesting. And then there's a ton of lupins, of course, mixed in, and I have no idea which this one is. And then delphiniums, which I knew they existed, but I rarely see them in bloom, and they were quite something. And then this one really shocked me. So over there walking along the lake, there were irises, and this is a true iris, and it's Iris missouriensis, and I was like, it took me a while to find the name. And I was like, that's an odd name for something growing in San Diego. Well, it turns out it's native to the Rockies, and it grows in the headwaters of the Missouri River. It also shows up in the Sierras, and then it jumps all the way down here to Lake Laguna in San Diego County. So it's a true iris. It's in very wet areas, which is why I don't have a great close-up. It was hard to get to without getting your feet very wet. And then nearby were these, I'm not even gonna try to say that, I always say it wrong, these bulbs. I know there's a great collection of these at the Botanic Garden there in Berkeley. And they have them all tagged by where they grow, and I can't tell them apart when they bloom down here. I've tried to grow it, I've never succeeded. You don't see them over here to the coast, which might be why, but you do see them up in the mountains. Another Clarkia, got a ton of Clarkias. This one also is spread all the way across California. This is only about 1/2 inch across, but it has this wonderful maroon color, so they call it wine cup because of that. And then this plant took me a long time to find the name. A lot of people on California Native Plant Society website were trying to guess the name, and they were all giving me wrong names. They weren't matching. And I thought it was a phlox for a long time. Anyway, it turns out it's leptosiphon. And it's pretty much known for growing here in our local mountains and up into, this is Riverside County. And it is just fabulous. And it is all along the road, all the way out in late June in Cuyamaca and up in a little bit up into, well, it's under the pines in Laguna Mountains. But it looks like snow in June when you drive there. And it's only about 6 inches tall, but the mats get like 3 feet across of this. And it's just solid flowers when it's in bloom. It's really spectacular. Occasionally you'll see a pink one. Different hike. We're all the way out here now to July 4th. So our flower season kept going. It's usually well done by early June. So July 4th, we're still going. Vulcan Mountain is the mountain above Julian, you know, with the gold country, our local gold country. And it's all been preserved, which is great. So they have this wilderness preserve out there. And here again, we're still blooming the Mariposa lilies. Some really great colors on these. And mixed in was the other Mariposa lily we saw mixed in at the other place, which was a good 30, 40 miles away. And then we looked at this one earlier. Here's more cream cups. This is what was the main bloom up there. All along the trails were thousands and thousands of these cream cups just finishing up.
Jim, can you tell us what elevation was this at?
Vulcan gets snow, so it runs from it's about I don't think it's 1,000-foot climb. The top of it's over 5,000 feet. So Mount Laguna is around 5,500. Cuyamaca is 6,500. And Iron Mountain is 3,300. Kind of give you an idea. Does that help? The tallest mountain in San Diego is actually on a reservation, and so people don't go there, but it's Coyote Mountain. It's right on the border with Riverside County, and it's 3,800 or 6,800. You can go there, but nobody does for some reason. I don't know why. I used to mountain bike ride up there. Anyway, so the penstemons are showing up in July. They were actually out there earlier, but this is incredible, and this one shows up all the way up to where you guys are. Pretty common, or not common, but it's around. And then back to the honeysuckle. I had a picture earlier of it not in bloom. This is it in bloom. And then this little flower, Bloomeria, I guess is how you say it. Terrible picture of it. So I knew about these flowers. I actually used to have them on my hill here in San Diego, but they disappeared over the years. And then I never saw them again. I hadn't seen them in years. And then 2019, up around Laguna Mountain, they were everywhere. And then they were here on Vulcan Mountain, and there wasn't like one or two. There were like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And then last year, there were none, exact same place, none. I was like, wow, so the rain really triggers these. But the odd thing was, we went hiking along the Sweetwater River, which is only, I don't know, maybe 2,000 feet in elevation. It's not very high at all. And that was last year, which wasn't a wet year by any means. And there were hundreds of them along the river down there. And I was like, that's so weird. What an odd plant that it skips around like that. Because we went up there the same weekend on Vulcan Mountain, and there were none. Well, not Vulcan, but Lake Laguna in July last year during the pandemic, and there weren't any. This plant, nobody ever knows what it is, and I'm not even try to say the name, but it's fringed spine flower. And what's interesting about it, these are only about 1/2 inch across, and it makes these mats. It's only maybe 6 inches tall at best. And it looks really dominant here. It's not, you don't see it very often. But where you see it is you're driving I-8 through the mountains, and underneath where the hills have been graded to put in the freeway years ago, on rainy years, you see the side is this just glowing hot pink. You're going by so fast, you can't make out what it is. All you know is for some reason the hill is hot pink. And if you get up close, it was growing at Vulcan, you can get up close to it. This is what it actually looks like up close. And usually you get one here or there, but this is all the way out in July. In 2019, there were just whole hillsides of it. This plant, I'm not going to try to say the name. Everybody always mistakes it as being a dandelion. This is like fiber optics. When the light hits these little white, I think these are the seeds, it refracts. And so you can see these like, you know, a mirror out in the chaparral. You'll see these from a long ways away because the way it picks up the light and refracts it at you. And whatever you do, do not Google this common name. You will get some really nasty pictures. Another penstemon, very common in Laguna and Cuyamaca Mountains, is this red one. It also moves all around California. A little hard to get a picture of. Anyway, it's a big hummingbird feeder. This tube here is the exact length of a hummingbird tongue. And it's about the only thing that pollinates it, I believe. And there's usually hummingbirds wherever you see this. Back up at Lake Cuyamaca, still on July 4th. In the wet areas where that meadow foam had been, by July 4th, a Indian milkweed had showed up. And this is about the size of a grapefruit, big flower milkweed. Didn't know we had them here. And then mixed in with it was the lesser paintbrush, which even though it's called lesser, is taller. It's about 18 inches tall, but the flowers are smaller and it likes really wet, damp areas. And there were hundreds and hundreds of these mixed in with these, more of the delphiniums. And these were about 2.5 to 3 feet tall. And then kind of near there on the highway, there were fields and fields of these. You couldn't get to them because it was a barbed wire fence and a very wet ditch. So I couldn't get at close ones, but when we went over to Cuyamaca, we could get right up to them. I was surprised. I mean, I knew they existed, but you only see like 1 or 2. I've never seen fields of them. And again, last year there weren't any. There was 0. It's so weird that they would be so many in 1 year and none at all the next. Because last year for us I know it was a dry year for most of California. It wasn't a particularly dry year for San Diego. We were about normal rainfall. But we didn't get any big wildflower show like we got the year before. And here's another one. And this is like something, you know, it looks like something you grow in your garden. Hespero yucca used to be yucca. Whippolite, Lord's candles is common name. You see this everywhere here. It's all over our mountains and goes a little bit over in the desert, but it's mainly in the coastal chaparral. And this is one in my home garden. I collected seeds about, I guess it'd be 16 or 17 years ago now, up at on the side of the road on a farm up on Mount Palomar. And much to my surprise, they all germinated. I had no idea it was so easy to germinate this plant. And 15 years later, this is about my 3rd one to bloom. I've had about 40 of these. Unfortunately, before they bloom, you get it's about a 2.5 foot across, the plant is, and it is one nasty spiky thing. And not only does it have spikes on the end of its leaves, the sides of the leaves are razor sharp. So when you reach in there to weed, you always pull your hand out and you get a nice slice along your finger. I always forget that it's going to do that because you always get weeds underneath them. They will grow dense enough to push out the weeds, but I have too much shade, so mine are kind of open and get a lot of weeds underneath them. And this is a close-up of it. This is why you grow it. It takes about, from the time it starts blooming to finish, it's about 2.5 months. And you may know this, but the yuccas have a very unique pollinator. The ovary is totally enclosed. It's not open to the air at all. And there's a specific moth that comes in there and drills a hole in the ovary and takes the pollen and pushes it in there for its larva. And that's how they get pollinated. So I was kind of shocked because there's not a lot of them around where I live. In fact, I don't know of any around where I live. And mine sets seed. So there must be more somewhere near where I live that the yucca moth found them all the way over here. Because the hummingbirds don't come to them, the bees don't come to them, nothing comes to them because they don't offer them any nectar. The only thing that pollinates it, and it looks like there might be a fly up there or something, but you never see any insects on them when they're in bloom. It's just that moth, and the moth comes at night. This is my favorite place in San Diego. This is Torrey Pines. The common area of Torrey Pines, this is the coast highway here, and this is the ocean. And where most people hike is here, and this is the part that's been overrun by all the San Diegans that have moved here in the last 30 years. And but there's a north annex. This is the lagoon in the middle, Penasquitos Lagoon. And you cross the lagoon, and there's another section of the park which is very unvisited. And it also has the Torrey pines, and it has the wonderful sandstone cliffs and all the erosion. But we're going to jump over to the old part of the park first, to the common park. And these are three pretty common plants you see there. This is deerweed. Grows all over the place here. It's in the pea family. It disappears in the summer. This is the Mojave yucca, which has also got a very weird distribution. It grows all over the Mojave Desert. And then it makes a huge jump, skips our mountains, skips our local desert, and then shows up in Torrey pines. And that's why there's a yucca trail called Yucca something or another, and a few other ones there. And it's kind of a very odd place for it to show up, right on the cliffs over the ocean. And then this is a native Opuntia that grows also there in Torrey pines. And this is a flower. It's in Torrey pines. Sorry, I don't have the name. This is very common. I expect you guys have it too. This is our native blue-eyed grass. I have tons of this on my hill. I've never planted it. It gets very tall. It gets about 2.5 feet tall on a rainy year. It blooms pretty reliably, and it's a little bit invasive, but it looks great. I mean, it's in the iris family. It's all over San Diego. This is a little bit rare. This is Linanthus, Orchis linanthus. This is only about 1.5 inches tall, and it makes these hot pink mats that really stick out. It grows in Torrey pines, and then the only other place I've ever seen it is all the way up on top of Cuyamaca. So this is about 200 feet elevation at most, maybe 300. And then the next place I've seen it is almost 6,000 feet. So I don't know why it grows in those two different areas. Seems a little unusual to me. You don't see it every year, but when it is out, it's quite something. We talked about this earlier. This is quite a bit of this in there. Caltrans is really using this in San Diego. I don't know what they're thinking. I guess it's okay. There's a related species, which is the one that grows in the desert, the brittle bush. And Caltrans has done some no-nos with it. They've mixed our native coastal one in plantings with the desert one, and they're hybridizing all over the place, which has a lot of the native plant people here upset. This flower also spreads all over California. It's a Celine, southern pink, and it's not pink as you can see. It's very red. It really jumps out at you. It's a late bloomer. It usually blooms after the rains have long stopped, and here it is out at July 11th, still blooming. And the pink word, you may know this, does not come from the color of the flower, but many of the Celines, the edges have this jagged edge, and it looks like they were cut with pink shears, which is where the name pink comes from for the common name. Southern California has a native snapdragon. This showed up on my hill, much to my surprise, a few years ago, and then disappeared. And then it showed up again 3 years ago. And when it showed up 3 years ago, it was really big. And I was weeding around it, and I broke it, quite a bit of it. And I stuck them all in the ground, and they all survived. And I was like, really? That's kind of my kind of plant. You just stick it in the ground at roots. And I had a ton of it 2 years ago, but it's slowly diminished and kind of disappeared, and I haven't seen any more. It supposedly will come back again. I'm not sure. But anyway, when you hike, especially in Torrey pines in July, it's the last bloomer. It pops up above all the chaparral with these, and it can be up to about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. And you see the flowers. You don't usually see the leaves, but it is a snapdragon. You pull that down, and it does the regular snap. And it's a little bigger than life size, about twice the size here in the photo. And I had to throw this in. This is our native salvia, Salvia clevelandii, which is when you hike, this to me smells like San Diego because it's everywhere. And this one's in Torrey pines, but it's all over in the Cleveland National Forest as well. Also a very, very late bloomer. It blooms later than many of the other salvias. Blue dix. This is kind of a fire follower, though it shows up in our chaparral, but I notice whenever we have a big burn area, this is the next year, if we get a wet year, the hills will just be covered with it. Well, normally what you get is this little one here with like 2 flowers and some stuff. But in the wet year, we had fields and fields of this, and they had these big head masses like this. And I saw them even in the cemetery out on Point Loma, which kind of surprised me that they were out there. And then this plant I knew about, but I never saw it bloom until July 2019. And I just happened to find out about it. Some of you may know Ken Blackford. He lives near me, but he used to live in the Bay Area. At any rate, he had photographed these and he said, oh, they're in the North Torrey Pines Annex. So that's why I went there. And they're blooming in July. Now I knew they existed because I see the leaves and I knew they were a delphinium and they're down in the ground. But when this blooms, it's 6.5 to 7 feet tall. It's unbelievable. It's lost all its leaves. And there were hundreds and hundreds of these there. And I never knew they were there. It's really weird. I've been Torrey Pines a million times, but July is not a great time here in San Diego because we got so many tourists and the last place you want to go is Torrey Pines. But anyway, they're also in the annex where nobody goes and they're right below some houses. So I was very surprised to see these. And then last year, also in July, we did a hike up at Iron Mountain. We had a cool day, which was unusually cool in July. And we went up there and they were also up there on Iron Mountain. And I also knew they were up there because I see them when I hike this time of year, but I've never seen them in bloom. And they were growing under eucalyptus trees up there. They weren't out in the full sun like they are in Torrey Pines. We talked about this earlier, California weedii, weeds mariposa and lily. And it's a pretty much San Diego plant, but it isn't every year, but it was fabulous that year in 2019, Torrey Pines, and it blooms very late. It's usually the last wildflower. This is Salvia clevelandii behind it here. Any rate, this is my favorite wildflower, so you have to look at a few pictures of it. And what I wanted to say was, so last year we had, whereas most California had a big drought, we had unusual rain in April. We usually don't get any rain in April, or very little. We had record rain the first 2 weeks of April. It rained for about 10 days straight. And we got almost our entire rainfall in that period. And so we had this really late wildflower season again. And I was very shocked that I saw these on the side of the road blooming in July up at Point Loma, right outside the National Monument. And here's one against cactus. And then finally, for 2019, Shaw's agave, I put it on here to show the distribution. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So the biggest stand of these in the United States of America, not Mexico, United States of America, used to be right on the border. And when they widened the border fence back in 2000 or 1990s, it was a big controversy. They bulldozed them all. They took the entire stand out. It was the biggest stand of them in North America or in the United States. They're all over the place when you go to Baja. When you head south on the coast on Baja, they're over the cliffs, especially south of Rosarita, just hundreds and hundreds of them, but you rarely see them here. So this is where it shows them growing. Now, I'm not convinced they're native to Cabrillo because the only place you see them in Cabrillo is around the lighthouse. And that lighthouse has been occupied since the 1800s. And you don't see them anywhere else in Cabrillo. And I'm like, why wouldn't it grow on the cliffs in Cabrillo if it was native, which is how it grows in Baja? So I think they've planted and they've naturalized. And then the other big stand of them is in Torrey Pines. And the other problem I have with the stand of them in Torrey Pines is they're right next to some other agaves that were also planted. And I think somebody planted them there too. So I don't know of any native stands of these in San Diego County, even though they're showing up here on the map. I would like to see where these are. Now, a lot of us grow this in our garden. It's very easy for us to grow because it loves our climate. But anyway, when it blooms, this is them in the parking lot at Cabrillo. And it's in December, right at the end of the year, and they're in bloom again right now. And I don't know why they planted them in the parking strip, but they planted a ton of them out there. And so we've always got a few in bloom. And they're quite spectacular because this is about 15 feet tall. And it's got this really husky trunk for the plant's not that big. The plants only get about 2 feet across at best, but it sends up this husky trunk that's a good 6 inches across. And it puffs like mad. So you always have more coming. And then I just wanted to throw in a few from 2020. This is a climbing milkweed, and I knew it was in Torrey Pines. The kind of an interesting story of Torrey Pines. I used to be a very avid bike rider and rode 3 to 4 times a week back in the 90s. And I rode through Torrey Pines hundreds and hundreds of times, never got off my bike until 2010. It was the first time I ever hiked in Torrey Pines. Anyway, so I saw this plant in 2010, which was also a wet year. And I've been back. I remember what trail it's on. I remember what it was. I looked and looked every year, and I didn't find it again until last year. So 10 years later, I found the climbing milkweed here. It's a vine, and it climbs through chaparral. It has these absolutely incredible flowers. And just a little bit in this photo. There's not a lot of them. It goes a few other places in San Diego too. And then another one that's native to San Diego, the Western azalea, which is very common up in the redwoods. Well, I knew it was here in San Diego. And when you hike, you often see things with azalea trail and azalea whatever. And I've never seen any azaleas. So I was like, rhododendrons. It's like, I don't think that. I think they're thinking it's mimulus and somebody named it wrong. Anyway, because you do see mimulus. Well, anyway, so this last year during the pandemic, we were always hiking a lot because that's all we could do. Went up to Palomar Mountain. It's about a little over 5,000 feet. And we were hiking this trail, and there they were underneath the, I forget what the trees were, probably oaks, really, really tall, big oaks, and also some big pines. And there they were growing naturally, and they were all white, which I guess is unusual because the ones in Northern California are usually pink. But there were quite a few of them, and these varied from 6 to 18 feet tall. So they are here, they are native, and they do exist. So that was kind of a shock. And then I knew about this plant for a long time, but I'd never seen it because it blooms in July or June. This is June. I don't hike in June or July usually at all, unless it's right along the coast, because it's way too hot for me inland by then. And I knew it was around in our mountains because I've seen it not in bloom. But I really knew it from a trip I did to go look at wildflowers in Wyoming. There's a close related species to it. And so anyway, I've never seen it here in bloom, but we were up in the same hike where we saw the rhododendrons. We went over to the fire lookout. There's a fire lookout on Mount Palomar because you can see from all the way to the coast to the desert on this fire lookout. And it's all developed. It's, there's hardly anything around there. It's all scraped away. So there's a view, and there's a old wooden fire lookout. And there between the parking lot and the road were these. So I found them in the oddest place. I never would have thought they'd be growing there. There were only about 30 bushes. And they weren't quite as spectacular as the ones in Wyoming, but they were pretty cool. The ones in Wyoming were at 10,000 feet though. And this was only 5,000 feet. So. And then our native California wild rose. Torrey Pines was closed all year last year because of the pandemic. It only reopened last fall sometime. And also they had some trail work they were doing. So they just shut the whole thing. So everybody was hiking. Penasquitos Canyon is just inland from there. And it's got a couple waterfalls in it that run all year because of all the car washing that happens inland in Escondido. So the creek runs all year. It has some nice waterfalls. So it was really crowded for hiking, but we did it anyways. And I was surprised along the river there, or the creek, there were these beautiful California wild roses blooming in June, and they were perfect. I mean, there were no bad leaves. There was no thing, it looks like something, eat that one a little, and they were all in full bloom. So I've not really seen that plant very often. It's very happy on almost no water. And then on the same trail, just a few feet away, I knew we had heliotropes, but I'd never seen this one. And I thought maybe it was a weed, a non-native. But when I looked it up, I found out it's pretty common here all along the coast in California. And it was pretty beautiful, I thought. And again, it was so green and lush, and it was so hot in June 26th. It's like, how does that not burn up out here? So some quick resources. I use CalFlora a lot. I bet a lot of you do too. CalScape is actually founded by a guy here in San Diego who has a garden in Poway on his property. He bought the adjacent mountains. He was a high-tech guy, and he's a real interesting guy. And he has his entire property planted only in plants that grow within 11 miles of where he lives, or 20 miles or something. And it's quite an incredible garden that he has. Anyway, and then the California Native Plants Society's Facebook page. When I can't find a plant or can't figure out what family it's in and can't get started on it, I post it on there, and I always get the answer in less than 30 minutes, sometimes less than 1 minute. There's so many people on that site, it's amazing. BorregoWildflowers.com is a really great one for our desert. They have an app, And the app, Borrego, which surprises people, comes all the way up to the backside of Mount Laguna. So Borrego State Park has elevations in it almost 6,000 feet. And because of that, it picks up all of our mountain wildflowers. And that app, you can find everything on there, and you pick them by color, and it doesn't have distribution of where they grow, but that one really helps when all you got to go on is a flower. And it's really great when you're in the desert. You also can download the app, and because there's no Wi-Fi out there, and it'll still work for you while you're hiking or walking around. And then I get a lot of ideas from the San Diego Society hiking page, Facebook page. In fact, on all these pictures, that was about 25 different locations in San Diego spread across the state, county. And that was just a touch of them. But when people post their pictures, they often post a wildflower. And that gives me clues onto, I'll go, oh, I've never seen that. So then we go do the hike and find it. And then there's this site called hikesdcounty.org. And it's better than I forget what the one most people use is, the commercial one. This is a non-commercial one. All the hikes are pretty well updated. They're all crowdsourced, and you can download the maps. And as we have learned, you need to download that map before you get out there, because once you get out there and you don't have cellular, you get lost, which has happened a few times. So anyway, and then my final here, back over at Cabrillo, this is that same agave shawii in bloom with hummingbird. And there's a video, which probably will be really jumpy for you, but we'll play it anyways. And it loops. There were about 6 hummingbirds on it that day and a lot of bees.
How fun.
So I hope you can hear me. I'm very sorry about the stupid internet. Are there any questions?
We've been able to hear you just fine the whole time.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been great.
I don't even know what I'm connected to right now. If I look, I'm worried it'll break, so I don't even want to look.
Does anybody have any questions for Jim? I must say your photography is really beautiful, and your I think you did a pretty good job with the plant ID. I think Bart said something about the aerophyllum. I don't know. I can send you the.
Somebody fixed one of them. What was it? This is not aerophyllum. It's, I don't know which slide it is though.
Oh yeah.
It's a yellow flower. I remember that. But Jim, yeah, Jim, not a question, but just to say thank you. This was amazing. Your photos are great, and it's lovely seeing a lot of familiar plants that I didn't know even grew down as far south, like our native, Rhododendron occidentale. I had no idea that it was in San Diego County, so that's really a treat to see it.
Well, I got to tell you, it's not very much of it in San Diego County.
and Jim, Andrew here, and I've been watching with Josh, and we enjoyed that very much. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I have to say, I've lived in.
Oh shit.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, you're muted, Jim.
Oh, I only really started hiking in the last 5 or 6 years. Well, I always hiked a little, and I've been amazed. I mean, San Diego really amazed me in the amount of wildflowers here, and I think part of it is all the burns. I'd say that the fires really have helped our wildfire situation, but they have. And, your fires were later than ours. Ours were back in the mid 2000s. So it's all had time to recover. But that really makes a difference in the wildfires, because it used to be just dense chaparral everywhere you went. And there wasn't dense chaparral's, frankly, not, I mean, it's kind of interesting, but it all looks alike. It's not that interesting. But when it burns, you get whole fields of wildflowers where it used to be. So,
Jim,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Jim, Kristen Yanker Hansen here. I just want to tell you, I don't know if you ever knew Wayne Roderick. He died quite a long time ago, but he always said the wildflowers always excited him. He would go to the previous year's burn, because he said you'd see things you would never see otherwise.
Well, I used to live in Encinitas for about 14 years, and my view was of the hills in La Costa. There's an area there called Elfin Forest, and I used to mountain bike ride there. And I was mountain bike riding in 1996, and that we were noting that the chaparral was about 20 feet tall, and we were riding through these canyons, and it was so dry. It was October, and I was like, wow, if this caught on fire, it's gonna really go. Well, guess what? It burned the next day. And so that spring was wet, and that whole hill, in my view, was solid blue dicks and wild onions. And people at the Hort Society was pretty new. It was only 2 years old at that time. People brought in wildflowers from that burn area, and all these wildflower peoples over San Diego, they couldn't identify them. They go, we don't know what this is. We've never seen this plant before. So I thought that was just amazing to me, that was all underneath all that 12-foot dense chaparral just waiting to sprout. I couldn't even imagine it. And that was, to me, just amazing. And from my house, it was really incredible because the hills were always black looking because they were chaparral, but when they were in bloom, they were like purple and pink and yellow and everything else. So anyway.
Jim, I'm curious, do you have shooting stars in San Diego County? I can never pronounce the Latin. It's like dodecathion. Someone can correct my pronunciation, but
do you mean the one that hangs upside down that's related to cyclamens?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah.
It's pink and it has a yellow. They were there with that chocolate lily. I didn't post any pictures of
I
it.
see it. Okay.
They bloom in February here. And I only know of 2 big stands of them, but apparently they're around. But usually February, unlike the summer, February is too cold here to hike because our mountains get snow. So they're right there. They're probably out right now if they're around. But I rarely see them. But I know they're around. There's another one that they call that, and it's a weed, and it's from South Africa. But I think you're talking about our native.
Yeah, I mean a native, yeah.
Yeah, there's a white weed that grows on the freeway that I thought was a native plant for years and found out it's a terribly invasive weed from South Africa. I had no idea because it grows right with the wildflowers.
Jim, this is Dick Turner here. Thank you. That was a stunning program. Your photography is outstanding, particularly
Thank
this
you.
last video with the hummingbird on the agave. Well done.
Most of the photos are with the iPhone. I hate to do a plug here. So about half of these photos were done with a camera. And then I bought the iPhone 11 in 2020. And man, I don't use my camera anymore. The iPhone 11 with 3 lenses, because I can do all, there's not only a few pictures in here we're using it, but that thing is incredible. It does something to make your pictures look better than they really are. I don't know how it does it. So
that's really great to hear. This question is actually for Bart. Bart, do you have any predictions about wildflower displays in the greater Bay Area this year?
It's probably not going to be a very exciting year simply because the rains haven't been well spaced and it's been generally too dry. It's still possible, probably in the Mojave, if there is a lot of rain this month, it could still happen, but my guess is it's probably not going to be a very good year anywhere.
I was in Borrego last week, and there was the Chiparosa that was all that was blooming, and there weren't any wildflowers. There wasn't anything even coming up. I don't even think they had an inch of rain this winter. It's really sad.
Bye.
Bye.